All right, we are live. I
Oh,
appreciate
okay.
it's so kind of you to give us some time today. I really appreciate it. And I know things are winding down for you, as they are for many people in the academic community. But Dr. Lee, I thank you again for this opportunity to talk about your latest book with us, Diné Identity in a 21st Century World. And this is the third book, correct, with the University of Arizona Press?
Correct.
Then but this particular book is the third of a four-part series. And in this book, you focus on Diné identity. And can you elaborate a little bit about why it was important to focus on that topic at this juncture in the series?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. First of all, I just want to thank you and the press for the outstanding relationship I've had in the past and the publication of this book and previous two edited anthologies focusing on philosophy and then also sovereignty. Um, I wanted to focus on this topic because of the importance it has for not only just Navajo people and Diné people, but I think in general for indigenous people. Particularly here in the United States, there's a very different experience when it comes to Native identity versus that of other Native indigenous peoples in other parts of the world. There are some similarities, but there's mostly a great deal of distinctiveness. And so, because I'm Navajo, because I grew up learning about the different knowledges and stories that reflect who we are as Diné people and our histories, I really wanted to focus on identity in that way. And as you mentioned, it is part of this four-part project idea that I put together when I first started in the academy as an assistant professor. And this is just being the third part on identity. And it's a very important part to me because it reflects our histories and it reflects who we are at the moment and where we're going, I guess, if you want to use that term, in the way that that recognizes and appreciates and respects our ancestors and our histories, and what the future holds for us as Diné people. And so that's really one of the big reasons why I wanted to do this, was to continue in that mold of thinking in that way.
Let me apologize, Dr. Lee, first of all, because this whole fly by the seat of your pants idea of live streaming a conversation rather than being a formal, honestly, who knows what we're doing with Zoom anymore, right? Rather being a formal book panel.
Right.
But, I really didn't give you a proper introduction, but to folks out there who are listening in, Dr. Lloyd L is a well-noted, recognized Diné scholar, citizen of the Navajo Nation. He's Associate Professor of Native American Studies at the University of New Mexico. His research focuses on identity, masculinities, leadership philosophies, and Native nation building. As we said in the beginning, if you didn't have a chance to chime in then, Dr. Lee has published 3 books with the University of Arizona Press: Navajo Sovereignty, Diné Perspectives, and then the latest is Diné Identity in a 21st Century World. Did I get all that right, you think?
Correct, yes. Thank you.
Anytime. But I appreciate you explaining why identity at this point. You also start this book with a traditional origin story, and I wasn't just thinking of obviously the folks who are Diné identifying, but many different folks where it's like, oh yeah, of course, if you're going to explore identity, you want to start with the origins, your origin story, whatever that may be, and why start? You know, as a scholar, why start with the origin story in this case as well?
Uh, there's several different reasons, I think, and I'll mention a couple. One reason is that I'd like to provide context in terms of what the subject is, what the focus is, in this particular case, it being identity. And so that's important to establish. Because it's very easy to come in and start talking about a particular subject, in this particular case, you know, in Diné identity, but any subject, and automatically come in from a worldview and a perspective that you come from wherever you're from, your upbringing, your knowledge, your education, your interactions with people. And so, so when you read something, or in this case on the subject on Diné identity, you might not quite have a connection or an understanding in terms of why this particular approach or why this particular way of being. So, so I think it was important to at least establish some context in regards to that this is how we as Diné people see ourselves in terms of our histories and our way of being. So I definitely wanted to do that. But I think the more important reason for doing that, the second reason I wanted to mention, is the fact that our narratives, our stories are so important to who we are, where we've come from, and where we're at this point and where we're going. And it really has laid us a path for us to live our lives and for the challenges that come about and how we deal with those challenges and overcome them. Because we're human beings and we're people who are going to be dealing with challenges. And so those stories, those narratives, really provide a pathway for us to reflect upon those challenges and how we can come up with plans and ideas and ways to overcome them. You know, the current situation with the pandemic now is a very good example of that, and the challenges that Navajo people are facing today with that, you know, with the number of high positive cases and the number of people who have passed away, and people trying to, you know, stay home and trying to get the necessary essentials that they need to live and to be well, and the challenges regarding that. And so to me, those narratives really kind of show how the way that has been done in the past, and how we can utilize that information today. I do want to mention, though, that the story that I share in the book and in other previous publications is a version that's been out there for a while, that has been published by Navajo people themselves, particularly at Diné College, which was Navajo Community College back in the late 60s and early 70s, as well as a lot of important traditional Navajo scholars and people at the time who gathered the information, gathered the knowledge, and put it together in an English format. You know, very basic format that people can read and learn more about it. That's the one I follow. I don't want to, and I purposely don't want to include anything that hasn't been written, just because I think it's not the right thing, the right approach to take. There are ethical questions regarding that. So that's the version I use. And I also talk about how there are multiple versions of our narratives, and each one of them is accurate. And I don't try to propose or be a proponent of one version being the absolute correct version and all the others are incorrect. That's not how I think about those things, and that's not how Navajo people have been in the past and how they are today. Navajo people are, and the Navajo Nation are very diverse. I've told my students this in the past when I've talked about Navajo histories, that Navajo Nation is a very much like a United Nations. You have a lot of families, a lot of clans, a lot of communities that are very distinctive. That there are similarities, because that's sort of some of the characteristics of our way of life. But there are also a great deal of distinctiveness and differences, and we have to appreciate all of that. And I think hopefully the book talks about that and emphasizes that when it comes to identity.
Yeah, it's pretty wonderful. I'm going to just say at this juncture, for folks who are tuning in for this conversation with Dr. Lee, if you have any questions for Dr. Lee that we can address at the end of the convo, please put them in the comments, and we'll take a look and see if we can get to them as well. What do you hope other Diné take away from this book?
Oh, that's a great question. I hope I would like to see them think about their own experiences, their own upbringing, and really kind of highlight those experiences and how it's helped them be who they are as a human being, as a person, and how those elements that reflect who we are as Diné people are a part of them, and how they continue that in a way that is beneficial for them as well as their family and their communities, but also reflects how we are today and how we live today. Our way of life is distinctive from our ancestors in a lot of different ways. And there's quite a bit of similarities too, but I just hope that Diné people see that our diversity is our strength, and our differences are our strength, and that who you are as a Diné person is a reflection of who we are as Diné people, and that each one of us is a part of that, and not to get kind of bogged down in sort of that either or paradigm thinking that I think a lot of Native people, but I think in general just people fall into thinking that process that you have to be this or that, and you can't reflect the diversity and distinctiveness of what it means to be a human being. So I just hope that Diné people, if they do have a chance to read the book, that they think about it in that way, and that they kind of really appreciate themselves individually, but also the connection that they have to their families and their communities. And so that's I really want to see that positiveness that comes from that experience.
What of scholars? Obviously, we are a publisher of scholarship, and you are a scholar. What of your fellow scholars? What do you hope that they take away from this book and the series, for that matter, thus far?
Yeah, that's another good question, and I really respect and recognize the small number of Native and Navajo scholars out there. It really is a small number. We know a great deal of people. I know a great deal of people, and it's when you go to conferences, when you go to scholarly gatherings, you see pretty much the same people over and over again, and really appreciate them and respect the work that they do, and the importance they have to their families and the communities and what they're trying to do. And I really think that one of the things I hope that scholars take away from the book, and as well as the series, on the one on philosophy and one on sovereignty, is that individual people, their experiences, their ways of thinking, their being, is so important to the future of Native people and what they share, their experiences, the way they think and the way they do their work and how they interact with people and their communities and indigenous peoples in general, I think are so valuable and so important to the work that we need to do in Native American studies and indigenous studies. And so I'm hoping that, when they read the book, that they recognize that, and that the people that are in the book, the few that are part of that talk about their experiences, kind of really reflects on that and really kind of drives that home for us. I've always thought that the more perspectives, the more viewpoints by Native people talking about, these important areas like identity, like sovereignty, like education, like philosophy, all kind of health, all kinds of different things that are so important to us as Native people and as Diné people specifically. And that the more that we can talk about these things, the more that we can share our points of view and our experiences and our research and where we're coming from is so valuable. And so that's sort of the hope, based on the scholars that are out there and that take a look at this particular book as well as the others.
In this particular book, those who contributed, was there anything that struck you in particular with of the voices that folks who did contribute? Anything that you were surprised about, or that you think was particularly thoughtful in regards to identity?
Yeah, I don't think I was surprised by any of their points of view. I was really, so I don't know if the right word is proud, but I was really, in a very positive way, appreciative of the strength that each one of them has when it comes to their identity and to the challenges that they face. Either on a daily basis or a monthly or weekly basis, and their willingness to talk about some of the things that they think about in regards to their own life and their own educational experiences is so valuable. And I really appreciate that and respect where they're coming from and how they think about these things, how they think about their identity. And so that to me was I really kind of gave me a great deal sense of positiveness because each one of them, it shows that. Each one of them in their own way shows that. And I don't, sometimes when you look at, well, I shouldn't say sometimes, many times when you look at literature and articles and books that look at Native people historically, it's always sort of this deficit, negative type of thing. And that's important to talk about, but it's also, you need to have a balanced way of looking at those things. And you need to have some positive aspects of who we are as Diné people, as Indigenous people, because there are a lot of that happening now. Just going back to the current situation, you hear about the devastating impacts that the virus has had on many Navajo families. But you also see the strength and the courage and the positiveness that you can see happening on a daily basis. People who are going out there and trying to protect family members and friends, and providing supplies and so forth like that, making masks, all kinds of different things. Those are really the signs of that strength and positiveness that really, to me, that the book, I think, really kind of brings out. But it's not to say that it's solely just particularly that, because there are challenges too, and that's part of life. And so you have to take those aspects, all of it, in that way.
Yeah. The one thing I'll get to another one of these questions that pops up in my brain that I didn't give you a heads up on, but what do you want to, can you give us a little bit of a preview of what we may expect from the fourth book of the series?
Sure. So the 4-part series, when I started thinking about this a long time ago, was to focus on each of these areas. So it would start off with the philosophy and the different diverse perspectives that we have. It would go into talking about, sort of this concept that we hear all the time amongst Diné people, but amongst Native people in general, the concept of sovereignty. How does that play out in various different realms? This third one focuses on identity and who we are, both on an individual level as well as a communal point of view and communal connection. And then this fourth book is going to be focusing on the land and the environment. The land and the environment is really a foundation of who we are as Diné people. And we have many families, many communities that have all kinds of different experiences and narratives and stories that talk about the land and the connection that people have to the land and how they live their life, and the challenges that we face today with it, particularly with a history of mineral extraction, uranium mining, coal mining, natural gas, oil. Just to give you an example, another example of that, the situations in northwestern New Mexico with fracking taking place in the last few years and continuing that. You have challenges to the land regarding the environment, pollution, and stuff like that. So you have to really kind of take that into consideration. So the fourth book is really going to be similar to the perspectives and the sovereignty, trying to get as many different points of view regarding the land and the way they see it, and what the challenges are, and how they overcome those challenges in a way that reflects who we are as Diné people. Excuse me, sorry for the phone there.
It's okay.
Okay, sorry about that. I had to mute the mic there. But yeah, so that fourth one will be focusing on that, and it's going to include sort of an academic point of view, but it's not really going to focus specifically just on that. I think my idea is to have as many people as possible contribute a piece, because a lot of people, when they think about the land, they're thinking about their home. They're thinking about where they grew up, or where their grandparents live, or where their mother and father lives, their aunts and uncles, and so forth. And so that's the connection that they have, and the experiences that they had, growing up there, or living there, or spending time there. So that's another example of that diversity that I've been talking about. So just to give you an example, people who live in Dilcon, Arizona, has a very different experience with the land versus that of people who live in Shiprock, New Mexico, versus that of people who live in Tuba City and Kayenta, in Arizona, and people who live in Crown Point and Tohatchee, and in my mom's home community of Noshchitty, New Mexico. So that's the reason why I want to be sort of all-encompassing, because the home and the connection to that home, and the way that the land resonates with individuals and families, I think really encompasses all of that other three books as part of the series. When we talk about identity, and we talk about philosophy, when we talk about sovereignty, and so that's sort of my envision of this. That it's going to take a little longer, I think, because I do want to include as many people as possible, both scholars and people who are not scholars, people who grew up in the communities that still live there, and whatever they want to share about the land and what it means to them and their experiences, and really trying to be as open-ended as possible, because I think sometimes we don't recognize that we should do it that way. In the scholarly world, we're very so much, set in this parameter of what academia is and how we're supposed to do things. And I appreciate that, because that's an important part of getting the necessary research, getting the necessary scholarship out there for helping our Native people, for helping Native communities, and just the human race in general. But I also appreciate the fact that the personal experience comes out as well, and I want to also acknowledge and respect that as well.
Thanks for that. Wow, because that's expansive. I mean, the topic that I think would be pretty amazing to read, in terms of how you gather all these different stories that, in a sense, I know it's not stories, but of perspectives of folks in land. I look forward to that. That's going to be wonderful. I don't know if there's anything that we did not, that I haven't brought up that you think is important to discuss, or something you might maybe want to touch upon regarding the book that I didn't.
Well, I do want to mention, and I mentioned it in the book, the people, because when you put something like this together, it's not just you have so many people that help you in the process. And so I do mention this in the book in terms of who do I want to acknowledge, but definitely the people that I acknowledge in there are so important to the academy, to the scholarship. I don't want to use the word that word, but that's the scholarship that needs to be out there. And so I do want to recognize that, because they're the work that they do, the scholarship that they produce, the connections that they have to their communities, and are so valuable. And I appreciate them so much, because they drive me to do the things that I need to do to help my family, to help my families in my home communities, to help Navajo people, to help Native people, and just human beings in general. And so I think hopefully the book kind of brings that out, at least when you talk about some of these identity markers and how you think about these things, and how it really resonates for each individual, and then the connection to community, because for Navajo and all Native people, connection to community is so valuable and so important. And so in the process of putting the book together, that acknowledgement of people is important too. So I just definitely want to mention that, and appreciate that this book on identities is coming from that point of view, and it's not just solely purely academic. There are aspects of that in the book, but really it's about the connection to the individual person and to the community and the family in that way. So I just wanted to mention that.
I imagine that when we all get to the other side of this virus as well, and as the nation does too, that there will be other ways of also looking at add community and add identity and hopefully, as you said, with lots of continued stories of hope and kindness and folks taking care of each other.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I appreciate your time. I'm just checking in with folks. We don't have any specific questions. Amanda Tachin said, yes, that is good. Our diversity as Diné people are our strength, and yes, to move away from the duality, binary thinking that creates division, to see the multitude of our being. That's pretty cool. Thanks, Amanda.
Very good. Yes.
Well, I look forward to talking with you again. And
Yes.
like I said, really enjoyed this book, and I appreciate its purpose and your scholarship so very much. And on behalf of the University of Arizona Press, thanks for your time today. Thanks to everyone out there for tuning in. And we'll put this up on our website so folks can listen to you later if they didn't get a chance to tune in with us today.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. Everyone be safe and be well, and we'll see you down the line.
Sounds good. Thanks,
Okay.
Natalie. Take care.
You too.